This is For the Rest of Us with Ken and Megan Castellan, a podcast about theology, faith, the Bible, and life. You know, for the rest of us. Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to For the Rest of Us with Ken and Megan Castellan. I am still not Megan Castellan. I am Adam Eichelberger. I work with Megan at the Episcopal Diocese of Central New York. I'm a lifelong Catholic, now a baby Episcopalian. I'm just trying to figure this all out for me and, well, for the rest of us. You can just consider me the Joey Tribbiani.
How you doing?
To her Chandler Bing.
Could I be more sorry?
And we'll be there for you as the rain starts to fall. As we navigate this life and look at things through the lens of the Episcopal Church. Megan, what do you have today for the rest of us?
Today, we are talking about the structure of the Anglican Communion. Woohoo!
Okay, all right.
I figure since we've been talking about Nazis and crucifixion the past couple of weeks, it's time to lighten things up.
A little bit of a palate cleanser.
A little bit of a palate cleanser. And also, our dearly beloved Pope Francis entered life eternal on Easter Monday. And now that everyone is very excited about the cardinals and the conclave and all of this, I thought it would be a good time to delve into the structure of our own tradition.
We do love a conclave. We do love the messiness of electing a new pontiff. And even though it's not exactly the same, this is pretty good. And this is good for me too, because again, listener, I am a baby Episcopalian. And so I know something about structure and authority in our church. So I'm going to learn along with you. So what do you got?
Yeah, man. So as we have discussed before, we like the Pope. Nice Pope. Good man. We're sad that he was sent into life eternal after his meeting with J.D. Vance. No comment. But as is written in the 39 articles in the back of the prayer book, the Pope hath no jurisdiction in this realm. And so for us, the titular head of our worldwide communion is the Archbishop of Canterbury, a bishop who is the historic head of the Church of England and therefore the head of the worldwide Anglican Communion. Now, fun fact, that job is also up for grabs, which is the first time both the Pope job and the ABC job have been vacant at the same time since 1691.
Wow.
So if you really want to, if you're an enterprising priest, you could take both jobs and conquer global Western Christianity. If you really wanted to get your hands dirty.
And historically, the role of the person who is in charge of all of Western Christianity is always great.
Yeah, I'm sure any person who wants to have both of those jobs at the same time is a sane individual who is not in any way megalomaniacal. That'll be fine. But also, the Archbishop of Canterbury has much different power than the Pope. The Anglican Communion is something called autocephalous, which is an excellent word that sounds remarkably like a fantastic sea creature, I first thought when I heard it. And what that means is it's a confederation of autonomous churches with independent acting heads, autocephalous, that gather together by choice. The distinction of who is in the communion and who is not comes down to, and I'm not making this up, who is invited by the Archbishop of Canterbury to participate. You have to be in communion with Canterbury, which translates to, in the past 150 years, basically, to being invited to this conference that he throws every 10 years at his house. So basically, it's a tea party. It's a big tea party. It's an important tea party. But what holds the third largest Christian church together is a tea party to which you must be invited by the Archbishop of Canterbury. And that, my friends, makes you an Anglican church.
Sounds fancy.
Yeah. That's all it is. What do they do at this tea party? Not much. They drink tea. They talk to each other. There's Bible study. They get to know each other. It's apparent, and they pray a lot. Like it is a lot of like getting to know each other, getting to, trade stories about what life is like in their respective churches.
Getting to know you.
But they don't like make legislation for the worldwide church. They're not in control of anything. They just have a big party and they hang out and they talk about being bishops. That's kind of it.
Sounds like a good time.
So if this is sounding to you like, oh God, this is no way to run a railroad, what kind of like loosey-goosey, hippy-dippy nonsense is this? Yeah, you're not wrong. This has occasionally run us into some rough waters. But part of the reason the communion is this loose is how we got started. And we got started by accident. It was unintentional. Like much in our English church history, the way we started was an accident. We sort of fell backwards into things. We know, of course, that the Church of England started out when Henry VIII decided, as we said before, that the Pope would have no jurisdiction in his realm, that he, instead of the Pope, would be in charge of the Catholic Church in England. So he was going to be in charge of the monasteries, and he was going to be in charge of whether priests were punished for breaking the law. He was going to be in charge of all that. He sort of then accidentally invented his own church, which I'm not sure he meant to do, but he ended up doing it, and, might as well. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you are, England, at the same time, decided to have an empire. So as Henry was accidentally creating his own church, he was, somewhat on purpose, creating an empire. So they were sending out missionaries, along with all of their explorer people, to all the ends of the world. As they sent out colonial tentacles all over the globe, so they sent out missionaries. Robert Hunt, who was a priest, went along on the 3 ships that landed at Jamestown in 1607. So right when we established the first permanent English colony in Virginia, we celebrated the Eucharist. And that was essentially the start of the Anglican Church in America. So, hooray. England is establishing colonies, and as they are doing that, they are sending over priests and clergy and colonial people who want to celebrate their faith in the Anglican tradition. They start parishes and they build up churches with bricks. They make dioceses. They kind of carve out their own way of doing church governance in this new world. They have pews made of boxes. It's all very nice. You can go to colonial Williamsburg and see lots of wonderful examples of colonial churches. The churches in the colonial world were nicely governed by the Bishop of London, because there is a canon in the Doctrine of Discovery that says when you send out explorers and missionaries to preach the gospel, the new territory that they claim is covered under the diocese of where the explorers departed from. So all of the 13 colonies were covered under the Diocese of London until the Revolution. That was fine. So everybody's happy, thriving church. Then we revolted. We had a revolution, which made things super awkward because it meant that we couldn't really write letters home to London anymore. Now the Bishop of London was a little bit mad at us.
It's kind of like texting your ex.
Right. It made things very awkward. Also made some problem with bishops, meant we couldn't make new clergy, meant we couldn't have bishops anymore. That's another issue that we'll talk about if we ever talk about American church structure. But once we do finally figure out how to get bishops, which we sort of borrowed them from Scotland because they were with us on the whole fight the English thing. Once we do figure out how to get bishops and we kind of build our own church, this confuses the Church of England. Because now we're a whole church in our own right. We have bishops, we have everything they need, and we keep calling them. We keep sending letters and saying, oh, could you give us advice on this? Could you give us advice on our new prayer book? Could you give us advice? And they're like, we don't know what to do with you. We thought we were done.
New phone, who dis?
After a period of time, they decide it would be better if we could just be friends. If we could just sort of hang out together, visiting occasionally, trading clergy back and forth, and it kind of becomes a thing. This creates the Anglican Communion. This idea that the pattern of Anglican life and worship is transplanted into various cultures and contexts around the world by virtue of the expansion of the English Empire. And then those independent churches stay in some sort of friendly relationship with their mother church. So as other English colonies grow and develop, their churches do as well. it becomes a little bit more standardized. As England figures out what happened with us, they decide to get more intentional about the process. They intentionally send and appoint priests and bishops for countries that become part of the Commonwealth. So Canada, India, Pakistan, Palestine. England intentionally sets apart bishops and clergy to go serve them. But almost immediately, within a generation, the Anglican Church has a priority of raising up indigenous clergy to lead those churches. For example, the Anglican Church in Palestine, they have the first indigenous Christian bishop of all of the Christian bishops in Palestine was the Anglican one, because of this really strong drive towards contextualization. The kind of goal for the Anglican Missionary Society, again, and I'm aware of the damage that was done in the name of missionary work, but one of the goals of the Anglican missionary work was enculturation, to hand off the project of church governance and building up the church to the local clergy as soon and as quickly as possible. And then those clergy and bishops just sort of came back and hung out with England. The other thing is, it's not like modern communication was there yet. So the church in Palestine could do a whole lot without anybody in England knowing exactly what they were up to. You had more leeway. It's one of the reasons in the US, our structure is so different than anybody in the rest of the Anglican world. We have direct elections of bishops. We have a lot more democracy in our process than anyone else. And one of the reasons for that is that we were left on our own for so long. We sort of went feral. And by the time anyone figured out what we were doing, it was too late to stop us. By the time we get to the mid-1800s, we're beginning to get enough modern communication with telegraph that other churches are noticing what they're doing, and they're beginning to get a little peeved by it. People are traveling, and it becomes a little bit more important to get more people on the same page. So we get the innovation of every 10 years, let's get all the Anglican bishops together. They had been inviting everyone to Lambeth every so often, just kind of get out, everybody come back for like a homecoming thing. In the 1890s, they're like, okay, how about every 10 years? Let's standardize this. In 1998, someone gets the bright idea that while everyone is together at Lambeth, they really should vote. Let's vote on things. So they vote on a number of resolutions. I think one is on climate change, one is on sort of the duty to spread the gospel. The one everyone remembers is a statement on homosexuality. It is a fairly milquetoast statement. It says that even though there is sizable disagreement among the bishops, the majority of them believe that homosexuality is incompatible with their reading of Scripture. There is nothing in any of the statements that they vote on and that they communicate. They're basically like communications out of Lambeth that make anyone at the time think that they are meant to be binding documents, because up until now, they have not been. However, in 2003, so 5 years later, Gene Robinson is consecrated in New Hampshire, and everyone just loses their minds. When Gene Robinson, who was the first openly gay man to be consecrated a bishop,
Who, if I remember correctly, we actually mentioned and talked about Gene Robinson a little bit in a previous episode.
Yes. When he was elected, there was a lot of pressure from the Church of England to the United States specifically to not go through with the consecration. I think the Archbishop of York came to General Convention that year and gave a speech telling us that if we did this, we would wreck the Anglican Communion. There was so much wailing and gnashing of teeth that the Archbishop of Canterbury at the time, who was thought to be a progressive, he had written extensively before he was appointed about the need for greater affirmation of LGBTQ people in the life of the church. He was thought to be progressive. I remember when he was appointed, everybody was very happy because his predecessor had decidedly not been progressive.
Not exactly shocking that the British come across as a little conservative on things.
Yeah. He was not great at walking the tightrope. So his solution to this problem was to convene a committee, very Anglican, and the committee issued a report called the Windsor Report in 2005. The Windsor Report did not feature much input from Americans or Canadians. Canadians, while this is all going on, their Diocese of New Westminster had begun officially doing same-sex blessings. So they were also in the hot seat, but because we were drawing so much fire, everyone forgot about them. So the Windsor Report said, Okay, here's what we got to do. First of all, America, stop. Just stop. No more gay people. No more gay clergy. Just stop. Stop right now. Promise you'll stop. Also, we need to agree that the Archbishop of Canterbury is in charge of everything. And we're going to set up this legalistic framework called the covenant. We're going to have an Anglican covenant. And we're going to sign on to a constitution that sets up a couple of governing instruments. And the Archbishop of Canterbury is going to be in charge. And then we're going to have some committees that are also in charge. But we are now going to have the ability, if one of our member churches does something that the others don't like, they can kick the member church out.
Okay.
So we're going to have to abide by this covenant now. We're going to have a constitution. We're going to have some rules. We're going to have some frameworks. We're going to have some agreements about what's normative and what's not. And you're going to have to abide by the 1662 prayer book. And there were a couple problems with this. First of all, which I think people forgot to communicate to England, the American church couldn't just stop doing anything. There was nobody in the American church who could say, okay, everybody stop. General Convention could, but we couldn't just call a convention and tell everybody to stop. That's not how anybody else in the world of Anglicanism works. One of my friends who did Anglican Communion stuff during this time told me that it just really confused the English church people. They kept saying well, can't your presiding bishop just make them stop? And he's like, no, that's not how, no. General Convention decides. General Convention decided. They voted. Everybody voted. It happened. It was everybody. It's not just one guy. So we couldn't just stop. The horse had run out of the barn, was down the village, in the valley, off the mountain. It was far away now. Second, turns out nobody liked the idea of a legalistic framework. We didn't like it because we felt like we were about to get punished. Turns out nobody liked it. Third, know who really didn't like it? All of the super conservative African churches who rightly figured out that they would have to be answering again to the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is not democratically elected. The Archbishop of Canterbury is appointed by the king. And that didn't go over well. Turned out that this great solution that Rowan Williams kind of trotted out, and that, to do him credit, I think he thought was really going to save the communion, did save the communion by making everyone mad at him. Because everyone was like, we're not signing that. We're not giving up our ability to do what we think God is calling us to so that we can answer to somebody picked by your weird royal family, whom I'm sure are lovely people. They seem very nice. But many of us Anglicans around the world fought many wars to not have to answer to that royal family. We would like to continue in that way of freedom, please. So as it turned out, in a sort of ironic twist, because at the time, the American liberal Episcopalians were just beside themselves with how are we going to respond? And we have to have a protest and we have to vote it down. We never voted on it. By the time it came up for a vote in the US, everybody else had voted it down. So fast forward to the future. The Anglican Communion survives. We're not best buddies. There are still some bishops that will not receive communion with us, which is tragic.
Stop it. Get some help.
However, they show up, and nobody's walking out of the communion right now. And I don't think the threat to the idea of communion is nearly as strong as it was. And we've gone off and ordained a lot of gay people, and so have other provinces. I think one of the things that is a plus of our style of government, sort of ridiculous as it is, and I like to make fun of it, that we're all bound together by a passive-aggressive tea party in an English dude's backyard, is an odd way to run a church, run a global church. But the things that binds us together is that people choose to be a part of it. People choose on an ongoing basis that we are going to recognize what binds us together, and we are going to honor that relationship. And I think the worth of that kind of outweighs the sort of slight ridiculousness of where we came from and how we got here.
Well, I gotta say that particularly with this episode, we're focusing more on structure and authority within the global Anglican Communion. But not only just with that, but also how the church works here in America and the Episcopal Church. I have grown to deeply appreciate a much more democratic and communal process than what I'm used to. Much of my history is rooted in, okay, this needs to change. And then just like a change gets made and nobody really has any say in it. Or like, we're going to restructure this thing and it just happens. Or this diocese needs a bishop. So one just gets appointed and sent there. I really have grown to appreciate, like I said, that democratic way of handling things, and that the church, being the people, have way more input and influence in how they are governed, for lack of a better word. Because I mean, I don't really want to make it sound like we're governed by anybody. Like, for example, in our own diocese, our bishop doesn't like govern us like a tyrant, but she does guide and shepherd us. And I think that's really what I'm more kind of clinging to, is that leaning way more into the guidance and the shepherding aspect of what authority does in our tradition rather than what we see in other traditions.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have an understanding of authority that kind of goes along with that enculturation piece, that it really does stem from that it is a gift of the people. And to the extent that you are a part of the people, that you understand them, that you have their best interests at heart, and you are a part of them, and you sort of suffer with them, in, as Oscar Romero would kind of say, then you are able to carry that authority for them and with them. And there is something about our Anglican structure that really leans into that. And so the times that we are at our best is when we really sort of reflect that understanding of authority. So the first female priest in the Anglican Communion was ordained in China. It was in 1945 when Japan had invaded mainland China by Hong Kong in Macau, and she was a deacon already. They couldn't get priests behind the enemy lines during the siege to get to these churches. And so the bishop of the area was like, well, Florence, you're already doing that work. I'll just ordain you for this period of time. It's the war. Nobody's going to hear about it. It's going to be fine. So he ordained her, and she went out celebrating communion to these churches. She was like crossing enemy lines. Her biography talks about like, in this really like everything's fine language. She's like, oh yeah, and then a bomb fell and I had to like weave around the falling explosions, and it was fine. God was with me. So she's doing this incredible work to make sure people have spiritual sustenance during a siege. Then the war ends and the Anglican bishops are like, oh no, you need to undo that. Undo that.
No, sir, I don't like it.
And how does one go about undoing that?
That's the thing. So her bishop calls her and he says, we have a problem. And to his credit, he sticks up for her and he says, it's an indelible mark. You can't undo it. I've made her a priest. She's a priest. And she agrees to lay aside her orders until such a time as it becomes more allowable in the wider church. And then she's taken to a re-education camp in communist China. Like it's a whole thing. We'll have to do a whole episode on Florence. But what I love about that story is it is so Anglican that the way we got women priests was somebody looked at a pastoral need and he's like, look, you're functioning like a priest. We need you here. Go for it. Do it. I don't care. That kind of responsiveness to the reality of a situation, to people's needs, I think is one of the places where we are at our best. We don't always do that, but that is, sort of like one of the best places of our charism. And then we, of course, probably screw it up, but it was there for a minute.
It's also pretty English of us to allow something to happen, then look at it and be like, oh no, we must insist that you undo this thing that you have done. And it's like, nah, that's not how it's going to work, Chief.
Yeah. We shall never speak of this again. Just don't tell anybody.
Megan, anything else that you wanted to share with all of us?
There is a live stream of a live reading of the conclave script featuring Brett Goldstein and Iowa Debris.
Yes, I saw this.
I highly recommend it to everyone.
So that you already beat me to the punch. We always ask Megan for a recommendation when we wrap up every time. And so that is your recommendation from Megan, is go check out the live stream recording
Yes.
of the table read of Conclave. And if you really want to get church nerdy, it's, very dramatized. There's a lot of artistic license that gets taken within it, but go watch Conclave, the movie, just because it's topical and it's what's going on. For a long time, I hadn't seen the movie, and then it started popping up in my algorithm in clips. So I watched probably a good third of the movie in 30-second clips. I'm like, I got to watch this whole thing. And it's fascinating. So please go ahead, watch Conclave, and check out the table read. And remember, listeners, if you are enjoying For the Rest of Us, Roundhouse Kick, a 5-star review for us. Make sure if you have anything that you would like Megan to cover, or you want me to ask Megan, please visit our podcast page at cnyepiscopal.org, or get in the comments. Hit the comments section. Leave us something that you want us to cover. We are looking forward to speaking with you next time on For the Rest of Us. Thanks for stopping by and checking out For the Rest of Us with Can and Megan. If you like the show, maybe subscribe, share it with a friend, leave us a review, and we hope to see you again next time. For the Rest of Us is a production of the Episcopal Diocese of Central New York.